to our next presenter, which is Anita B. Thompson. Anita will be presenting on Salvia species more than just a pretty flower. And so Anita Thompson is an agriculture extension agent for the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension. Her specialties in extension are sustainable agriculture, agroecology, native plant use in agriculture, non-commercialized seed education, pasture management, and sustainable grazing operation. She has dual BS degrees from the University of Nevada-Reno in forest management and rangeland ecology, and a master's degree from Colorado State University in ecological restoration. Before cooperative extension, she has been a farmer, wildland firefighter, forester, reforestation specialist, silviculturist, and ecologist. Anita served in the Army and Arizona Army National Guard for 8 years and enjoys helping fellow veterans learn about plants and sustainable agriculture. Currently, Anita is the farmer owner of Double T Bar Farm in Taylor, Arizona, which has a small herd of dairy goats and previously grew seed for open source seed companies and seed libraries. And she's also the owner of Silver Creek Native Plants, a private native plant farm and nursery for foundational seed grow out, native seed production in support of land management and restoration needs, and consulting on use of arid tolerant or native plants in restoration and agriculture. So and I'll also say she's also the president of the Arizona Native Plant Society White Mountain. I'm sorry, you used to be, but you are still involved with that chapter. Sorry about that. All right, thank you very much, Anita. We are so glad to have you today.
Hi, thank you. And yes, I am, Jess Roller is the president now of the White Mountain chapter of the Arizona Native Plant Society, and I help her as an educational coordinator, kind of bringing in the educational component. And if there's anybody here from White Mountains, hi, and thank you so much for your support. I know of one, before I forget, Michelle Straight is our vice president, and she is also attending. And she's also a master gardener and does a lot of work in the master gardener program with the native seed and native plant component. So if you see Michelle, give her a huge thumbs up on that. So I'm going to go ahead and present on Salvia, which is more than just a pretty flower. And a lot of people will kind of just look at it as like, oh, it's great for a pollinator garden, which it is. And it's one of my favorite plants. It's a beautiful ornamental, but it also has a lot of historical significance and medicinal, food, things like that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I do on here have our non-native Salvia officinalis, which everyone knows as sage, the culinary herb. So it is a very beautiful plant though. Okay, so what I wanted to kind of talk about is what's in a common name. When we talk about sage, a lot of people will kind of have some different views on what it is in the, especially in Arizona. So Salvia officinalis, or your common sage, it's in the Salvia genus, but is not an Arizona native. It's native to the Mediterranean area. A lot of times in my work, we talk about sage as sagebrush, which is the Artemisia species. They're not salvias. What we are talking about though is true salvias, true sages, such as like this chia sage that is native to Arizona and in the Salvia genus. The taxonomy, and this is a great website if you're ever needing to find out if something is accepted in the taxonomy world. So it is the Integrated Taxonomic Information System. And so it will break it down to, by from your kingdom to your genus. And so with Salvia, it is the largest genus in the Lamiaceae family. So in the mint family, and a lot of times you'll remember the mint family is because it has a squarish stem. Not all of them, but most of them have like a squarish stem when you feel it. It's in the mint family. So Salvia is one of the largest genuses in the family. So world distribution, Salvia, most people know, has huge distribution. We'll kind of talk about how many there are here in a bit, but Kew Royal Botanical Gardens in England, they have a huge Salvia collection, and they do a lot of tracking of around Salvia. So this is one of their maps that kind of shows native and introduced. And you can kind of see it has a strong foothold in the Americas and Africa, Europe, and part of Asia. There's even down kind of like in Australia, there's a little bit. So the original name came from Latin, salvus, which is like safe, secure, or salus, or well, healthy, well-being, prosperity, or salvation. And so basically salvia is to heal. The 14th century, then it moved to 14th century French, sorry, it's been a while since I've spoken French. And then 15th century English moved over to our current, which is sage. Some worldwide facts that are kind of notable in the salvia world is Pliny the Elder was assumed to be the first person of European descent to describe salvia in writing, which is before AD 79. Now, keep in mind that we also had other areas that were not necessarily what writing, what would be Latin or something like that. That was descriptive or verbal traditions, and Africa and the Mexican, like the Americas, were kind of in that realm where it wasn't necessarily written in a form that we would recognize today, but it is verbal tradition or an ethnic tradition. And then Linnaeus, which father of taxonomy, he classified salvia starting with our culinary sage, and that's from University of California, Berkeley. Kew Royal Botanic Gardens, they list right now 1,112 accepted species of salvia in the world. Now, keep in mind, these do not include synonyms, non-accepted, or currently pending for accepted taxonomy. Right now, Africa is currently sequencing history and establishing kind of a lineage of their species. And then also Mexico and Central America, they are, well, I'll say maybe in Mexico, they are looking at right now 300 different species, and they have the highest diversity of salvia right now. And they are Mexico, it's very much a part of their economic, medicinal, and ornamental cultures. I use SciNet, or I use USDA plants and SciNet primarily. I do use iNaturalist, but I do like SciNet. So one of the things I did when I was preparing for this is I wanted to see how many of a thing, how many salvia there were. And because a lot of our salvias are influenced from the south, from Mexico, I wanted to see if we can, kind of look at that trend at how you move up. So I did a couple searches in SciNet. And so I searched for salvia, and then I said southwestern-ish because I can't like draw a line in the map to California very easily. You can. It just for this particular search, I just put in California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, that area to determine, okay, so we have 132 species of salvia in this area that is native and introduced. And then with Mexico, this is 328 native and introduced. Now, keep in mind, when you're looking at SciNet, it is a snapshot in time, and it is a snapshot based on research and surveys. So not 100% of the ground is surveyed. So we don't know 100% of where everything exactly is. So just keep in mind, this is a snapshot, and it's a very good snapshot, but it's not going to be the definitive on the ground. So I was kind of messing around with that to look and see some patterns. And then everybody, we love history, and I love ethnobotany, and I love understanding where everything came from. So I went, Kew had this really cute herbarium, had a very good 1838 sample from Mexico. And this was taken by Professor Carl Epling, who we have a lot of species out here that are credited to him. And it was mounted for Kew in 1927. And so it has all the original signatures and all that stuff, which I found was fascinating, that you can go to an herbarium and you can look at a sample from 1838 to kind of determine, how it was in 1838 versus now for some of these plants. So just looking at Arizona, we have about 42 species, and this includes native, non-native, synonyms, and taxa that is no longer recognized. Then if I went out and I just went in and changed the color of everything that was a synonym or no longer recognized taxa. And so then now we're looking at between 11 and 13, and it just kind of depends on the current taxonomy. When I say Arizona only, these species do go into California, Utah. They do spread out, but right now for this presentation, we're just looking at Arizona, so that's just why it's labeled Arizona only. The line does not stop. We know nature does not respect a straight line for most cases. So these actually branch out to other states, but we're going to look at what's in Arizona. So yeah, we're looking at between 11 and 13. You can see kind of like the Salvia dory has some subspecies and things like that. So just tried to group them by color. There's the USDA plants list where you can go in, and so you go to this page and then you can, I'm going to do a basic search. I did a basic search for Salvia. Then I selected Arizona and native. And so that was able to pull up everything in the plants database. And so plants is put on by NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service. So it tends to lean towards identification and cultivation. So they do have some really cool fact sheet and plant guides that will tell you how to plant these species. There's not a bunch for every single one, but a few will. I think there's a few salvias that do have these plant guides. So these are what is listed right now in the plants database, and they do use the taxonomy from ITIS, the one I showed earlier. And so just jumping back real quick, let's talk about salvia itself. Now we know where they are in Arizona. So how salvia works is it's a perfect flower. So it has male and female parts. And so what we're looking at is how do the pollinators get in there? I mean, you can see the flowers are so distinctly shaped. So we have our pollinator friend, and it can be a bee, it can be a fly, it can be a moth, it can be a hummingbird, it can be anything. And so we have the male parts at the bottom and then the female parts at the top. And so the pollinator will actually go into the flower, and it will brush up against all of these different parts, and then it flies to the next one. And that is how it spreads its pollen. So, yeah, it's just really interesting to watch how the pollination works with the salvia. And then they are also pretty much known for the fact that the flowers are always produced in like a terminal spike form. Very rarely, I don't think there's any instances where you will find any deviation from that. The leaves do actually change from variety. So you'll have different leaf shapes, but you'll pretty much always see these spikes. And then you will see, like with the chia, it'll have like them broken up, but they pretty much follow this form. So I'm going to talk about a few of the plants. And in here, I do want to just reference, I'm talking about ethnobotany, but I'm not an ethnobotanist, and I do have an interest in it, but just know that, and we're not doctors, so we can't prescribe or anything else. This is just for your reference, and you can go ahead and try to find some more information if you're interested. And I was only able to highlight a few of them. There are more, and you can go back to kind of some of those references that I gave and look those up. So the first one is Salvia amissa Epling, and so that ties back into Professor Epling. This one is called Santa Catalina Mountain Sage. It has some other names depending on where you are. The crazy thing about this one, it was originally supposedly recognized in the Catalina Mountains. They cannot find any record of this, and they cannot find them there today. So I did put descriptions in here for time. I'm not gonna read them all. But you can definitely see it has the bluer flowers, and then you have these more mint-like, so if you were thinking of like a spearmint leaf or something, it has those. And let's see here. So it does prefer like oak woodlands, deciduous riparian woodlands. It likes to grow with like sycamore, ashes, willows. And then it is found in canyon bottoms, perennial streams, floodplains, and shady areas with some sun. And so with this, there's two maps on here. One is SciNet that kind of shows where it grows. And then of course there's the observations, who did the observations by color. And then this is also from the Heritage Data Management System from Arizona Game and Fish. They're responsible for tracking a lot of these sensitive species. And Salvia missa is considered a Global Conservation Status 2, which is a G2 or imperiled. It's also on the USD Forest Service Regional Forest or Sensitive Plant List and BLM's Arizona Sensitive Plant List. That means that you cannot harvest the seed or the plant without special permit, and normally it's research-based. It is a perennial forb. If you were to cultivate it, your elevation range is going to be up to $5,000, wow, 5,000 feet. It will be gravelly, silty, sandy mixes. It does need some water, and it depends on elevation of the flowering period. However, if you wanted to buy it, Borderlands Restoration does have the plants. And again, these are not recommendations. Please do your due diligence before purchasing. Borderland Restoration is a really great partner with a lot of restoration. Let's see here, a lot of the different restoration programs out there. So they do have special permits, and they are able to work very strongly in the restoration guidelines. You cannot collect it on Forest Service or BLM lands without a permit, and then state and private lands require written permission from a landowner before harvest. And this one does not have any documented ethnobotany because of the fact it is rare. And also the other thing is that the genus itself has a lot of ethnobotanic uses, which we'll talk about kind of in some of the others. Salvia arizonica, desert indigo sage or Arizona sage. You can see the leaves are kind of more pointy than they are rounded. They have those gorgeous blue flowers, and they have the white inside. They're just beautiful. They are vulnerable, but they're not listed on any list for BLM or the Forest Service. They do, same with the previous one, they do like a lot of the riparian, but in this case we're high elevation, so they can also go, you can find it in pine forest, mixed conifer, pine oak, moist woodlands. So they do like a little bit of water. And so cultivation, this is gonna be your higher elevation. They do like rocky soils. They don't like to have what we call their feet wet, their roots wet. They want to be able to have water kind of move through. And then the flowering period is usually between July and September. There's no commercial availability for seeds in Arizona at this time. You can definitely check in California or some of the surrounding states. I was trying to keep everything local, but it was kind of hard because it's the end of the growing season, and so seeds aren't listed for 2023 yet. It's not listed as restricted on USDA or BLM lands. And then personal use for BLM only is reasonable personal need. Commercial collection on public lands requires a permit. And we'll talk about it in my later presentation, but in order to harvest on Forest Service lands that does not have an agreement at the Forest Service, at the forest supervisor level, of what the definition of an incidental amount is, requires a permit. So right now, I believe that's only the Coronado National Forest that has that definition. Every other forest, in order to harvest even one seed, requires a permit. But we'll talk about that later. BLM lands, it's a reasonable personal need. Salvia dorii. Purple sage, tobacco sage, it has a lot of names. And so this one has a complex history and has a lot of like synonyms and things of that case. So it is a woody subshrub. It's 1 to 3 feet in height and width. So you're looking at, the others ones were more of an annual form. This is going to be more of your perennial form, where you're going to have more year after year to be able to work with it instead of having to replant it. It's beautiful flowers. You have those really tight clusters. Got a little crazy there. So yeah, it does have like almost rosemary type leaves, or so, along those lines. it is vulnerable, but it's not listed on any specialized lists. You can see it kind of likes some of the drier parts of the state, kind of the upper parts of the more northern parts of the state. So this is something where the White Mountains, Colorado Plateau, Flagstaff area, you're going to see a lot of. Pinyon pine, juniper, sagebrush, ponderosa pine, and oak. A lot of the areas I work in, this is kind of one of the species I find. Dry systems, it really likes those dry systems. Now there is a subspecies. It's also found in Arizona. It is protected. And one of our presenters coming up has a lot of work in here on this, but you can't even go on SciNet and find where they are and the locations are because it is so protected. But it has these gorgeous, gorgeous, like magenta purplish flowers. So Frankie, who will be presenting later, has a lot of information on SciNet. Elevation range, you're looking from 2,000 to 6,000 feet. It really likes the sandy loams, the cobbly loams, the gravelly loams. So if you think of the soils that are kind of up on the Colorado Plateau, it does not like a lot of water, and it is usually a spring to early summer. The nearest available seed is going to be in California, and plants are going to be also in California at this time. It is not listed as restricted on USDA or BLM lands. Again, personal harvest for BLM, Forest Service, you need a permit unless you're on the Coronado. And then harvesting the subspecies, Mersii, is prohibited. So we cannot, at this point in time, we can't even touch it. We can just enjoy it. Ethnobotany, so sage is insane, to heal, right? To have that healing process. Headaches, stomach aches, cold, sore throats, epilepsy, faintness, general illness, earaches, fever, influenza, swollen leg veins, and then of course, keeping spirits and ghosts away and aiding in hunting. So this particular plant has so much of an ethnobotanic history, and it's just so amazing to be able to read about it and understand how this was used in the Americas to be able to treat all of these things. Then if you are of a certain age, you know chia. Okay, so well, here's one of our examples. Salvia columbarii. I will never be able to get that right. So this is a chia, and it is one of the most known for the fact that it is edible. The seeds are edible, and it is actually grown as a subgrain, or it's not a true grain, so pseudo grain. But you do mix it with water, it makes that really gelatinous substance, and it's very healthy and high in protein. So this particular one, you can tell because it has those, we call them pom-poms. So it has the actual the stem, and then pom-pom, and then stem, and then pom-pom. So they're really fun when we go work with the kids on them. They're really fun to kind of show them. This is listed as apparently secure because it is cultivated so often. You can find it in like juniper, palo verde, saguaro, mesquite, desert grasslands, and then it really likes the lower elevations. I mean, you can see on the map it goes up to the upper, kind of like maybe central around Chino Valley, Camp Verde, but after that, there's been not a lot of success in the cultivation of it. And then pictures here again of Professor Epling in 1927, and then also 1833. And then some of the seeds and kind of some of the leaf structure, you can see how different it is from the previous. Cultivation under 3,500, that means like I couldn't grow it where I was. It likes rocky, dry sands. You can buy the seed at Granite Seed or Borderland Restoration, and the plants are at Borderland Restoration, and this is in 22. If there are other recommendations, you can always also put them in the chat or things like that. The only thing that you just have to do your due diligence to make sure you are getting what you're hoping. Not restricted, make sure you have your permits. This is another one, relieves infections and eye wash. There's accounts of, made into a beverage, but for cake and much for food. They have used it to remove like alkaline or alkalis from water, reduces fevers, added to wheat to improve flavor, and then the whole plants were used to cover dwellings. This one is gorgeous. It's just beautiful to see. It has leaves like a globes mallow. So it has some very distinct leaves, lots of information on the description. It is apparently secure, so that means that there is quite a bit that was found during survey. A dry range, grasses, sagebrush, junipers, pinyon pine, oak, walnuts, and cottonwood. So this is another one that really kind of likes to fit in everywhere, but you don't find it everywhere. So you can go from a canyon to a mesa to a slope. You can go to all these different areas, and it likes to hang out in there. I was really excited to see that there's like a good population, kind of like on what you would think of like 191 from Stafford up to kind of Alpine. So definitely on my list to go visit those. It does go, you can find it up to 9,000 feet. The soil type, the water needs are variable. I mean, look at all the different places you found it when they were surveying it. And then there's no commercial seed availability. Again, not restricted, just make sure you have your permits and your permission. And then ethnobotany, there wasn't any information. So if you're cultivating salvias, most experts recommend starting from seed, not from cuttings. But they do have variable germination rates, and some germinate very well and others have poor. They are really hard to germinate, but the cuttings, they struggle also. Different salvias may or may not need stratification or special treatment to ensure germination. There's not a guide for most salvias, so a lot of it is finding your new salvia BFF and trying to figure out what they've done to make, the plant grow. The USDA plant site that I showed has planting guides for the chia and the dorii. Calscapes additionally has some information because I'm calling it native Arizona species, but they do reach up into California. They do also have planting information. They require good drainage in soil to avoid wet feet. They do not like to have their roots saturated in water. They want drainage. The best way to know when to start the seeds and transplant the new starts to their final planting spot is to know their life story, their variety, to get to know where they're at and then mimic that. And then do not give up if your plantings fail for the first to the 20th time, because it requires a lot of patience. But once you get them established, it's pretty awesome. So those are some additionals that I was not able to get to that are around Arizona. So Mojave sage, lemon sage, Arizona rose sage. Then we have some Perry sage and some of the lance leaf blue sage. I had the awesome chance to go to travel in Europe, and immediately when I went to Italy and Ireland, I went straight to the botanical gardens and found 2 international collections that do have Arizona varieties. The one at the University of Italy, Pisa, they had a salvia collection, and I was able to find 2 varieties, but the pictures didn't turn out. So I was able to remember exactly which they were. But then I was able to go to Dublin National Botanical Gardens, and I was able to find some of ours there. That in this picture, there's an entire row of all the salvias. So it was beautiful. It was gorgeous. It was so amazing to go way across the area and see all these things. So that's what I have.
Thank you very much, Anita. It's so nice to learn more about this, species that I'm sure everyone would agree is extremely beautiful, but there's so much more to them, as you said. Okay, we've got a question. It says, isn't chia easier to find, or is maybe the one that's available commercially, is that not native? Actually, that's a great question. I think I have the same question, didn't realize it.
Okay, so chia is easier to find, yes. All the accounts are that it grows so well in the area between Phoenix down to some of the middle parts of Mexico that it's actually easier to find, is what the accounts are. The actual, so it depends on your purpose. So if you're actually harvesting it, then you are going to look at small amounts and what you're going to use it for. If you're trying to do it commercially, then as far as that, it's not gonna work. You need to cultivate it. If you're just using small amounts, it's easier to find. The thing is so I'm going to show this book. It's backwards. Oh, this is Wendy Hodgson's book, right? It is backwards, but this is her book. She has an entire section in there on the chia, and there's an issue between it was changed to golden chia, and that became the cultivated variety as far as the original black-seeded chia. And so actually some of the varieties that we call chia today are golden chia, not the original variety. So there's kind of a mix-up, and it was a big thing. And actually there was a battle over it that is in her book about this particular plant. So when you're cultivating it, it may or may not be the correct variety. And then if you're growing it native, you got to check to make sure you have the right variety. And that's where you're going to get some of those benefits from that are listed in the ethnobotanical side. I hope
Right, and then just one person had asked, what was that book? And it was showing up forwards, it wasn't backwards to us. So again, that's Wendy Hodgson's book, which has been referenced a few times today, Food Plants of the Sonoran Desert. Great. And then we have maybe another minute for questions, or a couple others. Just a quick one. Someone asked, is Salvia greggii native to Arizona?
That's a good question. And I'd have to look back at my research, and I can look it up. Let me go ahead and answer that offline, because there was some issue where we couldn't figure out if it was a synonym of something or not. So I'm going to answer that offline.
Okay. And then just a real quick last one. Can you recommend any salvias for the Flagstaff area? Or maybe this is something worth looking at the plant list on the Native Plant Society website. I'm not sure if we happen to have any on there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Susan, I can go ahead and give you a couple, go on there and type in an answer of a few. So yeah, some of the higher elevation ones and the ones that were more towards kind of Tuba City and Holbrook and all those are going to be the best.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you so much, Anita. We appreciate it. And we'll see you later on this afternoon with your second presentation for us.